Hello, welcome to another episode of What Are You Selling with me, David Green, and joining me today is the author of The Sphere Saga, J.S. Willis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good. It's a different time of day here. We're kind of winding down, doing a little bit of work myself. So I was like, doing a few bits and then do this, and then I'll have a little bit more, and then I'll call it a night, I think. But you have the day ahead of you.
Yeah, it's noon here, so already spent part of the morning writing, but I'll get some more writing done this afternoon.
Excellent. Is that how you work? Do you split up your day in terms of writing? 'Cause I know some people kind of just do like a block of a couple of hours, or some people like to do like an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, an hour in the evening. How do you kind of approach it?
Well, it just depends on when I can find time to write.
Yeah.
Writing is unfortunately my full-time job, so I do have a full-time job. So weekends, I usually get up first thing in the morning before everybody else in the house and try to get as much done as I can. And in the evenings, I'll come home from work and try to get an hour or two of work in and get some stuff done before dinner and, eke away whatever time you can get to write.
Sure, yeah, sure. That's part of the when you're pulling back the curtain of creativity is like people are like these writers must write all the time. It's like it's literally whenever I can get the time sometimes.
Exactly.
Cramped into a little space with my laptop, just like I'm just going to do 200 words, and I feel a lot better that I've done that today.
Exactly. 500 words, whatever. If I can get words a day, I'm ecstatic.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, exactly. Um, so obviously you're the author of the Sphere Saga, which is a trilogy, and you also have an urban fantasy book, and I can see them all on the top of your shelf there, looking very resplendent. Just
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
Before we start talking about the books and everything like that, I want to kind of know a little bit about yourself. So obviously you've got a very lovely looking bookshelf there, so I can tell that you are an avid reader. So when did you first get into, obviously you write fantasy, so I presume that you also read fantasy as well.
Oh yeah, almost exclusively these days because writing time's at a premium. I listen to a lot of audiobooks now because going to and from work, and I started in that a couple of years ago, taking my kids to things, so I could listen to stuff in the car while I was waiting to pick up kids from different activities and things like that.
Right.
When I started fantasy, oh gosh, probably in middle school, I would say. Uh, I'd say the first thing I remember fantasy that got me hooked was probably the Complete Book of Swords by Fred Saberhagen.
Okay. Yeah.
They used to have it's actually on the shelf over there. They used to have like a book club, and my mom let me enroll in a sci-fi fantasy book club, and you'd get these omnibus books that had two or three books published in one edition, and that's the first thing I actually remember that got me hooked in it.
Right. And then where that's a great thing to be in actually. I wish there was still stuff like that.
Oh
I
yeah.
had that when I was a kid. I had the library, which I just pour through and be like, "So what have I not read yet?" Um, so where did your journey take you from that on then? What are the kind of things now, if you were to kind of say these are the things that have informed my work the most, which ones would you say?
Probably I love world building and characters. Probably the David Eddings, Bulgaria and Malorian, those two series. Before that, Raymond Feist's Magician series. That
Right.
Dragonlance probably came before all those.
Mhm.
The Dungeons and Dragons player, and then playing the Dragonlance stuff, and then reading the first two series of Dragonlance novels.
Yeah.
So kind of going backwards through, but probably the most influential thing on me now in my actual writing would be Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time and Brandon Sanderson Mistborn. I absolutely adore the Mistborn series. But Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time stuff is my biggest influence.
Yeah, mine too. And right next to the computer, I have the Shadow Rising coming in and out
There
of.
you go.
It's just because obviously on this channel, and people that are listening to us and watching us, if you're new to this channel, please do subscribe. We actually do have a Wheel of Time show on this channel called Easing the Reader, where we talk about the books and we talk about the TV show and everything as well. But I was just kind of writing something. I was like, how did Robert Jordan do this? So I just went back and just checked something out just to refresh my memory on it.
Pages and pages of description.
Yeah. But I like I really like I mean his foreshadowing is really good. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't actually, because sometimes it's very subtle and other times it's like this is a prophecy and it's going to happen and this is exactly how it's going to happen, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
so
still don't know how he would do that. I mean, there would be something in book one that you would realize 4 books later that was important.
yes, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And I got into Brandon Sanderson through Wheel of Time, obviously, in that period of time when,
Yep, same here.
same as you, yeah, when Robert Jordan died and Brandon Sanderson was taken over. And I was like, who is this guy? How will
Exactly.
it work?
That's what I did. Ran out and found a copy of Elantris. It's like, okay, maybe he can pull this off. And
Yeah. He's great. And he's so prolific as well. And a couple of reviews for my book said it's like a grittier Brandon Sanderson, and I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. This is that, because that's what I was going for. But he's so prolific and he just pumps out stuff all the time. And but one of the things that I sometimes think about when I have like an idea where I'm like, maybe I'm not quite at this level to tackle this yet, is that he wrote Way of Kings years and years ago, and
right,
didn't he? Because he was like, this isn't good enough, and I'm not at the technical level to do this yet. And then
scrapped it and started over.
yeah. And then after he finished Wheel of Time, he was like, maybe I can do this now, and he went back to it. And it's one of those things. It's like, you may have a great idea, but it might not be the right time to tackle it.
I actually had a similar experience when writing my Sphere Saga books. I mean, I had a complete draft of what I thought was fantastic at the first book, and then I kind of figured out that it wasn't all I thought it was, and experience. But thank God I had that experience, and I figured out I've got to go back to the drawing board because this isn't up to where I need it to be. So I walked away from it for a while, and then I got the idea to write my middle grade teen book, What is Thicker Than Magic, and I wrote that, and that one went really well. And I worked with a developmental editor on it, and then I worked with a developmental editor on Dream of the Sphere, the first book in the Sphere Saga, and I came to the realization my craft skills weren't there yet. I wasn't able to write the epic fantasy that I wanted to write the way it needed to be written.
Yeah.
And once I did that and worked my way through, I wouldn't say it's a simpler book. It's not epic fantasy, but it's still fantasy. And once I honed those skills some, then I came back to it and I was able to knock it out. And then then I did the second and third book and kind of finished them all at the same time.
Sure. So Blood is Thicker Than Magic, as just mentioned, is your urban fantasy book. So you had the idea for that second after the Sphere Saga and wrote it first. So where did the idea for Blood is Thicker Than Magic come from? Was it just basically when you were thinking about doing the Sphere Saga, you were like, I need to do something else first, and you just hit
Actually, I was working with David Farland on some of his online classes, and I was working through Dream of the Sphere when I was with him on that. And Dave kind of told me, he said, he told me there were problems, and just so happened he was going to be at the Writer Symposium at Gen Con in Indianapolis, Indiana that year. I think this was back in 2015, and he said, why don't you come over, if you can arrange it, why don't you come over and take my class and in person and see if you can get some ideas for some things. So I did. It was a week or two from when we talked about it. So my wife let me do it. I got some time off work. I went to the Writer Symposium and spent 3 days in Indy and at Gen Con. Spent a couple of days live listening to Dave talk, and that's when the ideas started flowing for Blood is Thicker Than Magic. I was like, I need something that's simpler. I need something that's, and the whole idea of it was, I wanted to write a book that my 10-year-old self and my 10-year-old son, my son was older than that, but something that boys at that age, 10 to 12-year-old range would like to read. And that's where it came from. It just, I did it first person. Everything was a little bit simpler, more basic than an epic fantasy, but it was kind of contained. And that's where it all came from.
Yeah. And that is, it's a standalone at the moment. Is there any?
It is. I'm halfway through writing the second book. I'm hoping it'll be a 4 or 5 book series, but I wanted to get, once I figured out that my skills were improving, I thought, well, I'm going to go back to the Sphere books, and I thank God I did. And it's the only good thing that came out of COVID and the pandemic and being isolated was I was able to focus on that, try to take my mind off things and everything was going on.
Do you read urban fantasy as well? Because like I have an urban fantasy series too, and it was kind of similar as well. Like I had an idea for an epic fantasy series, and I was like, I'll try. I'll do the urban one first. And funnily enough, the epic fantasy series, the first book came out first in the end. But I actually wrote the urban fantasy one first, and it wasn't something. It wasn't a genre that I would, or subgenre that I would have read a lot of at that point.
Yeah, I don't read a lot of it. I read some of the Harry Dresden books.
Yeah.
Butcher, and it's, you know, took inspiration from Harry Potter. I mean, not Harry Potter is truly urban fantasy, but it's more fantasy set in a contemporary setting. Sure. That type of urban fantasy. I don't read a lot of urban fantasy, but that's the kind of ideas that generated that book.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like obviously Dresden is the kind of the poster child of urban fantasy at the moment. And it was funny, like when I started mine, I'd never read Dresden. I was aware of it. I'd heard about it, and I'd seen like a few kind of YouTubers talking about it. And I was writing my first Nick Halloran book, and I was like, when I finish this, I'll check out Dresden just to see what it's like.
Right.
So read Stormfront, and I was like, this is quite similar to what I have written, but that's just one of those things. So then I read the next 2 Dresden books, and I was like, okay, he's going in a different direction to what I'm doing with mine. That's good, because it was quite similar. And but like the thing is with Dresden as well, when you get really into it, the urban fantasy thing is kind of a Trojan horse to get this epic fantasy series in there, isn't it? Because it becomes very epic fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Sphere Saga. So obviously you had the idea a long time ago. You were working with Dave Farland, who obviously Brandon Sanderson took his lessons as well and worked with. And sadly passed away as well recently, which is a big shock and surprise.
Yeah.
So you went back to it, and you decided. And before we talk about like what it's about and everything, I kind of want to talk about the writing of it and how you decided to release it, because you did a rapid release of a month at the end of 2021. So when did you decide to do it that way?
Actually about this time last year. I was wrapping up Blood is Thicker Than Magic, and I think I put it out in March or April. May have ended up coming out in May of last year. And once all that was in the pipeline, I was working on the Sphere Saga books, and I was finishing those all 3 of those up at the same time. And I booked my cover artist, and we started working on covers. And I said, you know, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it right. It may be crazy, but I wanted to get them out there.
Right.
So I said, you know, I did some research, looked around, and some people were suggesting, you know, sometimes rapid release works out well. And I said, well, you know, let's get them out there and see what happens. So I managed to pull it all together and got them out each, you know, October, November, December. So they're out there and they've been published.
So did you write them? You wrote them all together at the same time. Did you write them as like one continuous manuscript, or did you finish
the first book I've been writing for over a decade. Like I said, I mean, I kind of reconceptualized some of it and fine-tuned it, and I had a solid outline for the second book, which actually goes back in time 3,000 years from the first book. It's it's like kind of a prequel. And I had about half of it drafted, and then I started working. Once I got the first book, Dream of the Sphere, fine-tuned into a state where I was comfortable that it was in the right direction, then I started working on the second book and outlining the third, and it just kind of flowed. I wrote the second book And then I went ahead and wrote the third book right after that, just kind of in sequence. And then I went back and did complete revisions on all three.
Right.
And that way, I was able to, like we were talking about the foreshadowing, that way I was able to tie in stuff that happens in book three. I wait, you know, it's like, well, okay, this happens here now. I know this happens here now. So I need to go back and put some stuff in book one just to make sure I've got some foreshadowing there. And the stuff from book two, I was able to tie that back into book one because, like I said, it's just 3,000 years earlier. So it worked well to be able to do all three of those and working on them all at the same time. I wouldn't say it was all continuous manuscript, but it worked out really well working on all of them at the same time.
Yeah, the revision stage, it sounds like it would be something that's very handy to do, because you always have that thing as a writer when you start writing the second or third book in a series, and you've written something beforehand that kind of ties you into a certain place, and if you want to do something a little bit different, you're like, hang on a second, I can't because of this.
Right.
So it's handy to be able to have them all in front of you and go, okay, well, I'm going to go back and just change this in the first book, or tweak it a little bit. I can really kind of see the benefit of that. I think Joe Abercrombie did something similar with his recent trilogy as well. Like he basically worked on our manuscripts at the same time and released them a year apart. Maybe I will do that with my next series because it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I'm outlining the next three books in the series. It's going to be a second trilogy, so right. like a different story arc right after the first three books. So I'm kind of outlining all three now, and I started writing the first book of that just because I couldn't wait to get into it. So I actually finished the first chapter on that this morning. So.
Excellent, great stuff. So Dream of the Sphere, Dawn of the Sphere, and War of the Sphere. So tell us a little bit about them. So what is it all about?
To encapsulate it the best, I mean, my kind of elevator pitch for for the whole series is you've got wizard war criminals, a magical apocalypse, and family drama is basically what the series is all about. The reason book two goes back 3,000 years is the heart of the series is based around the three main characters in the second book, which happened 3,000 years before the first book. I don't want to give any spoilers, but you know, the first book is after a magical apocalypse happened 3 millennia ago. Magic has been outlawed and is suppressed. That's where the sphere comes from. The sphere was constructed 3,000 years in the past as a mechanism to suppress and keep magic at bay, so there wouldn't be another magical apocalypse. But everything's starting to fall apart 3,000 years later, and that's where book one takes off. Is this society that has been under the oppression of this theocratic government for 3,000 years is starting to unravel at the seams, and magic starting to seep back in the world, and that's where it takes off from there.
It sounds very interesting. I like how you know, you have this magic is banned and they're trying to control it in some kind of way, but obviously things of a magical nature will want to be used and will want to kind of worm their way out through what 3,000 years. I had a very interesting discussion with my publisher about fantasy timelines from something that was in my book. Why 3,000 years? What was there any kind of significance in that, or is it just that sounds like a good number?
I actually plotted out a timeline of how things came to be right before the apocalypse happened, and then kind of did a rougher outline of what happened in the interim period, and figured, you know, I was a history major in college, so I've got all kinds of medieval history books and timelines and things. So I kind of charted it out and looked and said, well, let's see what happens here. You know, they suppressed magic. The entire society before this apocalypse happened was based on magic, and now they're suppressing it. So they're starting over and basically sending themselves back to the Middle Ages, to a darker period.
Yeah.
See what happens after 3,000 years. Where are they then? And the answer actually is they didn't make a whole lot of progress because the government decided that they were going to keep things suppressed and intentionally not allow advancement because they didn't want to get to that stage again and have their world blow up on them.
Right. Yeah. Because that's really a clever way of doing it, because that is one of the things that you do get with people, let's not, fantasy fans are more forgiving towards it, where it's like 5,000 years have passed and it's basically the exact same as it was 5,000 years ago, right? Whereas like
Right.
people coming into it are always like, why is it the same as it was? Like, where's the advancement? So it's a good way to build that into the world building.
And that's what I did, and part of that with the world building in the first book is kind of explaining the characters start figuring out, wait a minute, what happened here? Why have we not gotten this? Why have we not gotten that? Why are we not to a better advanced place? And they start finding out, they start learning that their government had intentionally held everything back because they didn't want to reach this conflagration again, which is the event that blew their world up.
Interesting. That sounds really cool. So the trilogy is done, as we talked before. It's out. It all came out October, November, December of 2021.
Yes.
And you're working on a second trilogy now. So it sounds like you've got quite a lot on your plate, because you've got the second trilogy to the Sphere Saga, and you've got your urban fantasy book working on at the moment. So how's the rest of 2022 looking for you, and can we expect any more releases this year?
I'm hoping, at least the goal is to get the first book of the new trilogy out sometime in the end of the year. And I'm also hoping to finish up the second book in what's called the Arcana Chronicles. That's the Blood is Thicker Than Magic series. It's partially written. It's about halfway written, totally outlined. Actually, I'm taking a trip to St. Louis in June. Some of it's set in St. Louis, so I'm taking a trip to St. Louis in June for a wedding, and I'm going to take that advantage of that and go and visit some locations and kind of show things up and see if I have any ideas that spring from there. So, and I'm hoping to put that second book of that out. So I'm hoping for 2 books by the end of the year, but that may be ambitious. We'll see.
Well, very best of luck with it. And for people that are listening to us or watching us on YouTube or Spotify or Anchor FM, where's the best places to keep up to date with your comings and goings and work updates?
All my books are available on Amazon. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. My website is jswillis.net. My name spelled out, Jays Willis, WILLIS.net. And I spend a lot of time on Facebook. I do have an author page on Facebook, so you can find me there. I think my Facebook is Atlas Law Author. That's what I started it as, and that's what I kept it as. Yeah, but I've got other social media as well. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. I don't do as much on those, but I do cross posts sometimes on there.
We have to, don't we? We have to be on everything, and where it's
anything that helps. It's exhausting, but yeah, you kind of have to dabble in everything.
Yeah, exactly. Jay, thanks very much for coming on and spending some time.
Thanks for having me.
And everyone who is listening and watching, all of Jay's links will be in the show notes below. So please do check those out. Check out Jay's work, check out his books, check out his website, and say hello to him. I'm sure he'd be glad to hear from you. Jay, thanks again, and best of luck with the Sphere Saga and the rest of your writing in 2022.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And everyone who stayed with us till the end, until next time, thank you.